Hola!
I'm Johanna.
And I'm Denise.
Welcome and bienvenidos to the Love and Evolve podcast, where we discuss topics surrounding holistic wellness such as mental, physical, and spiritual health. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer.
Love and Evolve Wellness Podcast is a community space for conversation, growth, and healing. However, it is not a substitute for professional mental or medical care. El podcast no sustituye ayuda psicológica o médica.
We encourage you to seek resources and support in your community. We love you, los queremos mucho, and you matter to us.
Thank you for listening, and on to the show.
Hello. Welcome everyone to another episode from the Love and Evolve podcast. We are embarking on a 3-part series that will be discussing topics around trauma. So this being a topic that can be triggering, we just wanted to put a disclaimer here ahead of our episode so that if this is something that does not feel good to you, that you can hit stop on that button. And if you do move forward with listening, that you are in a space that is safe for you and comfortable, where you can pause when you need to.
And if you do feel ready to dive into this work right now, I'd like to let you know what the next 3 episodes will be covering. And then you can decide for yourself if maybe you want to skip this episode or listen into the next, or you make the decision for what works best for you. And so for this episode today, we are going to spend some time talking about how to prepare for this type of journey. We will be starting with a meditative practice, and then we will go into talking about needs. And then following episode, we will be covering trauma, the different definitions of trauma, and how we may be impacted by this today. And in our final episode on trauma, we were going to be covering complex trauma. And without further ado, let's get started. We are embarking on a very big journey. I'd like for us to create sacredness surrounding this work by opening up with a meditation passage that can also be used as affirmative prayer. If you are not in a space to do a meditation right now, listen in gently. Try not to get sucked into the meditation. Please only do so if you are in a safe space to do so. A little bit on this passage. It was written by Ernest Holmes. He's the founder of the Spiritual New Thought movement, an American New Thought writer, a teacher, and a leader. Please let this passage hold you safely with love, light, and compassion as you dive into your sacred journey. Perfect vision. There is one vision and one perfect seeing. My eyes are open, and I behold perfect life. No suggestion of imperfect vision can enter my thought. I perceive that all people can see, and that the one looking through all sees and is not limited in vision. I am one with a complete understanding of truth. I do open my eyes and I do see. This word operates even through me and manifests through my eyes now. Open my eyes that I may see. Gently bring yourself back to this space and become familiar with your surroundings. Know that you are safe and you are here.
That was nice, Joe. Thank you for that, for starting us off so gently and safely. And I'd love to hear about the inspiration behind that. What brought you to share that specific passage?
So one of the reasons that this passage is so personal to me and so special, especially in any kind of work that involves diving in deeper, is because it reminds me that no matter how difficult things can get and how scary things may feel, especially with trauma work, that there is nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with us. You know, the things that have happened to us, the things that we've been through do not define us. I think that this passage reminds me of that, deep down, I know who my authentic self is beyond what has happened to me. And so I just hope that this can help other people in beginning this work to know that they are perfect just the way they are.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, you are perfect as you are, and not saying perfect in as like there has to be this expectation. What we mean is that, perfect in all the imperfect sense of the word.
Yes.
It's, we at our core do know what we need and that we are love at the center of everything. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
As we explore today, we talked about, or in our intro, we introduced that this will be a 3-part series. So we did want to set a safe space for this to start talking about traumas. And the first part of that is starting easy. Well, it's not necessarily easy work, but, we're not just going to go and trauma now. No, that wouldn't be the right way to go about it, or definitely not a safe way to go about it. Where we would like to start with is needs. So this is a continuation of our goals episode, in the sense that we did talk about that goals may seem really overwhelming and not appropriate for what you're going through if you have your basic needs to attend to. And what do I mean by that? So basic needs would be safety and security, your physiological needs, that you're not going hungry, that you have shelter. Those are what are basic needs. And during a pandemic, there are many, many of us out there who are struggling, are struggling to get these basic needs met. So physiological, right? I'm cold, or I'm hungry, I'm not getting those things, or I don't feel safe where I am. If anyone has heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is where I'm kind of pulling this from. Maslow was a psychologist, and he studied human motivation. And so he wanted to know what motivates our behaviors. And he came up with this model, this hierarchy of needs. And you may have seen it. It's in the shape of a pyramid. And at the bottom is your physiological needs. Next level is your safety. Third, I believe, is like social, like love, connecting with people. And then above that would be
Self-esteem.
Self-esteem. Thank you. That's the next one. And then the very top is self-actualization. So that means you have found your meaning in life. You are fulfilled. You feel good about yourself and how you operate in this world. That's like,
it's like reaching your fullest potential.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So that's a mouthful. That's a lot to process and take in. And we introduce this because it is important to be aware of this, to know that this is happening. And also, this model that Maslow created is by no means a rigid model. So it's not like you've got to start from the bottom of the pyramid and work your way up. And if you're still in survival mode, which is, in your basic needs, exploring how to get those met, that doesn't mean that you can't explore such things such as self-esteem, self-actualization, like trying to find ways of personal growth. So you can definitely move up and down that pyramid, as well as knowing that for everyone, this will be a little bit different. It's by no means something that's rigid, but more of like a background to know that we do have these needs that will motivate or drive our behavior. And also, we do go up and down these levels as we go through life and experience life events. So you may be feeling at the top, at the tippy top of your world. You're like, I've got everything I could possibly have. Things are going great. And then as life goes, it's unexpected and you're hit with a job loss or a life event such as family separations, maybe a divorce, losing a loved one. So many things can happen. As we go through life, we have our ups and downs, and our needs go up and down as life progresses. And they also can be satisfied out of order. You can have the highest of self-esteem and be like hustling because you gotta, put food on the table, and you're really going and you're trying to do your best to make things happen, but you're like, I've got this. I feel so good about myself, whereas someone else may have all the financial security and really be struggling in self-esteem, right? So it can look very different for everyone. Again, this is just a foundation, a way to get a sense of the things that we're talking about when we talk about your needs.
Yeah, and then I think I would just add that we bring this up because as we dive into the other parts of this trauma work, and if we're not constantly checking in with ourselves of like, all right, where are my needs at right now? What does my body need? What do I need to feel safe? And then we're going too fast into this trauma work, it can really dysregulate us and put us in a state of really hypervigilant behavior or thought processes. And we just really want you to be gentle. We cannot express this enough. This is hard work. And it's important that we just keep checking ourselves on that. Like, what are my needs right now? Am I hungry? Am I like tired? Did I not sleep well last night? So then maybe today is not the day to try to conquer these really big, deep questions. But it is important too to recognize that there is something there that needs to be worked through. Going back to a few episodes where we mentioned that our body is our compass. And if things are lighting up right now, or if there's an area in your body where you're feeling pain or tension that you didn't notice before, that's telling you something.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So what need is not being met, and how is it being expressed in your body? That could be in blood pressure. We could be holding tension in our bodies. So it could be playing out in stress, fear, having our survival brain on, and it's in that flight or flight mode. We're in emotional distress, or we're in high anxiety. So that's how our body could be expressing that certain needs are not being met. And that can then also be linked to a trauma that has been left unresolved.
And then there's also freeze. We may just not be able to take action on anything. That's also a sign that something else is going on. That what is it about that, or what's going on, or and then part of it can be completely normal too. And we'll talk later in our next episode on how to distinguish whether what you're going through is a trauma or can be considered normal, especially given that the amount of trauma we're being exposed to right now in the world.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know about you, but now I'm glad that you mentioned the freeze, which is interesting because that is my response. When things happen in life, mine is to freeze. And it's interesting because things have come up, and someone not knowing me may think that I've got a really cold response, or that I'm uncaring. And it's because my body and brain have literally frozen and cannot have a response. And it'll take a little bit of time, a catch-up time, until I'm like, oh, this is happening. And now I'm feeling the flood of feelings, and now I can really feel what is happening. Whereas initially my instinct and has always been my response. And that's something else that usually we have a response, and we've carried that from childhood. So my response has always been to freeze. And it's almost like it's hardwired in me based on my own life events that have then said, okay, this is your go-to and this is your survival response. You freeze. So thank you for reminding me of that.
No
Maybe
problem.
My subconscious went, ignore. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating. Everybody expresses it in different ways. And I know for me, it depends on the type of circumstances too. Like, for the most part, my default is a flight response. Something's going on. All right, I'm out. I need to go figure it out. I'll come back to this when I feel ready and able. And please, please, please know that, we're laughing about this right now, but it's just, our bodies behave so differently, and it's going to be different for every single individual. And it's just a matter of figuring out, what is your pattern? What is it that your body is telling you? And I know for me, like, I usually do flight, but there are times where I freeze. And that is for me to reflect on what situations, what happens. Yeah, it's different for everyone.
It is different. And there's a lot of information there, because I used to be paralyzed in that response of freezing. And knowing how painful it was to experience in my body, going to that response, I didn't want to feel that anymore. It was like, it went from protection to, this is now damaging me. And what is it that's happening? And I certainly went to do a lot of personal work to then work through that, so that I can now no longer have that go-to gut reaction response in certain situations, and can go to something that's a little bit healthier for me, and reserve that fight, flight, or freeze for other situations where I'll really need it,
It's sort of this like ongoing process. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back on like the different scenarios in my head for me, and I'm like, oh, yep, nope, and then also thinking about, for some of those things, I'm still working on, and maybe it's something that it's just figuring out what your toolkit is going to be, what your supportive network is going to be, as these things progress or change or shift, or you get triggered or what have you.
Yeah, and it takes time. I mean, I'm in my mid-30s. It took me time. So if you're in your 20s and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going through these things, I'm such a mess. No, you're not. You're figuring it out, and you're doing the best that you can. There's nothing wrong with you. And we've also talked about us just all being really big kids inside. We're still kids. And if you have little ones of your own, whether they're your own kids or in your family, or kids that you take care of friends of kids of friends, and you've observed them, or maybe you've gone through this as a kid where that label of difficult gets put on, it's really good to then ask, what are the basic needs of this child, and are they not being met? Is there a self-esteem situation that's coming up? So with the kids around, that it's then triggering a certain response. So then maybe it's this child is having difficulty making friends because they have a hard time understanding the games, right? Versus just going, oh, that kid's difficult, right? Really diving into what needs are not being met. Are they hungry during these certain hours when it's playtime, and then they're hangry? Where that word came from. So there are really good ways to then look into what is not being met and what is causing a certain response, and that you can do with yourself as an adult, because you're still that big kid who needs to have their hand held, who needs to have just time. And this does take time.
Yeah, you've expressed so beautifully how our behaviors all have a purpose. We're not just acting for whatever reason. Like, it all has a purpose and meaning behind it, and really taking the action towards awareness to say, hey, I'm noticing that this is happening in my body, or even it happens after the fact. The important thing is that the awareness is happening, or that you're figuring out that there needs to be more awareness. Because if something happens and then you react, and then later you're like, oh, wait, I said that and I felt this way, but I didn't actually mean that. That was like an automatic response. It's all really useful and necessary information for us to be able to figure out what are our needs and how can we meet them. And also not expect others to meet them, but for us to figure out how to meet it ourselves.
Yes. And that reminds me, when I was in grad school, one thing that came up was, if you have something you want to talk about with your significant other, please don't do it while either one of you is hungry or tired. Because you're not going to get very far very fast if either one of you are feeling any of those things. And I'm sure some of you or all of you have experienced this in one way or another. It's hard to get somewhere if you're like, I'm just starving or I'm just tired, right?
Or the mix.
Or a mix. Get those needs met and then see where you're at when you're in a better space to then have those difficult conversations. Yeah. So how do we go about caring for ourselves, knowing that we're doing this work, right? So whether it's caring for ourselves or being mindful of others in our families that are doing this work, I certainly think it's important to extend some grace to ourselves and to others, meeting ourselves where we are, while doing our very best to meet those basic but essential needs. And when we can, through some self-care.
Mm-hmm.
What might that look like?
Well, I think we got to define it first, just because there's so many different ideas of what self-care is and what it might look like. And so, I just looked this up real quick, and it says the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. And there are many ways that we can do this. And I think the most effective are the ones that are specific to your personality and what you enjoy, what brings you joy. But we have some ideas of what people would like to do, and this might be able to help you come up with what could work for you, or you might already have some of these practices of your own. I know for myself, I love painting. I love Sharpie art. Meditation is a big one for me. Working out is another one. For some people, it might be journaling. Denise, jump in anytime.
Yeah, I certainly love movement, and it's interesting because I know all these things do me good, and I know what it's like to then struggle then to do the thing we know we should do that will make us feel good, right? I know that's also part of the hurdle. So for me, it's standing up and moving my body, and usually that's through yoga, and that can be like 5 minutes, or walking outside, taking a breath of fresh air. I love movies.
To music.
Music, a little dance break. I love that. Cleaning, interestingly enough, it's like that is so.
Yes, that is so therapeutic.
So therapeutic. I'm like, I'm just going to start sweeping right now because it makes me feel good. It's like literally, I'm going to sweep out all the stuff, all the bad energy out of here. I don't know. There's something about it.
I love doing that. I think the only part that is kind of gets a little tricky is when I end up cleaning my entire house and reorganizing every single item in the house, and then my husband can't find anything. He's like, "What did you do? You moved everything again."
So cleaning to a certain point. Let's see what else. Oh, animals. I love. So maybe you have a furry friend at home, a pet, even fish. I used to have fish as a kid, and I love those goldfish. They lasted a long time. They lived really long. Movies, books. So many choices. It's just,
there's something I really enjoy to do too. And it's not something I necessarily like sit there and do, but it's like, I'll put in some, what are those things called?
A jar.
Oil diffuser. A jar might be a good way too. It's like, no, oil diffusers, like having some kind of relaxing scent, or maybe there's like a comforting, I don't know if it's a perfume or like tea when it's heating up, or the smell of coffee. It's some kind of sensory.
Yeah, lighting a candle,
calling a friend.
Oh yes, let's not forget that. Definitely call a friend, doodle,
writing a letter.
There are so many. Yeah, a letter. There's so many options. That's what I love about this. That there really are. And something.
Reading a book.
I said that, of course. Hello.
Wait, you did? It's like, wait, how did she not say read a book?
I snuck that in there somewhere. But what I think could be helpful, and I've done this before in some work that I've done, is write down all of these ideas of things that you think might bring you joy, may give you a little bit of self-care. Write it on a piece of paper and then cut them out on so that they're written on like strips, that you can cut them out so they're on strips, and have a jar or a Ziploc baggie or something that you can put them in, and put all of those strips of ideas. Put all those ideas in one spot. And so when you need them, you're not going, oh, I don't know what to do. You can go ahead and pick one from your jar, and there's your idea, and see if it works. If it says doodle, you're like, okay, cool, I'll doodle. Or keep picking until one feels good. So, because I know sometimes it's a matter of like, I don't know what to do. I know I need something, but I don't know. So it's fun to have a little spot to go to pick an idea from. So let's bring it back to where we started with our needs. So we talked about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and checking in with if we are at survival mode, right? If we are trying to, as best as we can, meet our basic needs, so physiological needs, safety and security, if it's love and relationships, self-esteem, or if we're, self-actualizing. And again, that we can be in multiple places and at different places in that model. And we also went through talking about what it can express like in our bodies if our needs are not being met. So that can appear in a variety of ways. A lot of us can become sick. So if we are burnt out because we're doing too much and we're not meeting our needs of rest, right? So other ways, anxiety, stress, ailments and illnesses. And then we also talked about giving ourselves a little bit of self-care, because if we are exploring how to meet our needs, then we certainly have to give ourselves some grace and compassion and give ourselves that time to care for ourselves as we're doing this incredibly difficult work that is always ongoing. So it was important for us to bring that up and close with self-care, because we don't want it to seem like you've got to jump into this and, keep going until you figured it all out. Like, take your breaks, take care of you, go do what feels good and explore what feels good if you're still trying to figure that out too.
Another reason why we are choosing to talk about self-care at this point is because as we go into the trauma work, we are going to need some support systems. And some of those are things that we can control. And some of those might mean we need a little extra support, like what networks or resources might I need. But from time to time, as we go into any kind of trauma work, we will be triggered. It's inevitable that something might come up, or a word, or you'll see something on TV, or whatever it is comes up for you. Essentially, what we encourage you to do before you proceed is to build your toolkit, build your self-care toolkit, because those are the things that are going to help you come back to a place of feeling safe, of regulating any heightened emotions. But if we try to come up with self-care tools in the middle of it, it's going to be a lot more difficult, because our brain is going to be in a very dysregulated state to be able to come up with solutions. So take care of yourself by taking care of yourself ahead of time and preparing yourself for that journey.
Thank you. You compliment my brain so well, because that's what I was trying to do. You guys just listen to Jo. She's got it.
I feel like you compliment my brain. So this is like perfect harmony.
Basically, if you've ever been to therapy, you know that a good therapist will not just throw you into the deep end. They will prep you and build that relationship and help you build tools so that you can, when you're on your own and are living out in the world and do get triggered, that you know what to do. So that's basically why we talk about self-care. As we go into these other topics related to trauma, that you have an idea of hopefully what it is that helps you when you are in those difficult moments and how to care for yourself as best you know how. And while we're talking about this, also just another reminder, and we say this in our intro, that we created this out of love and wanting to share education on mental health and how we can best grow and become our highest self and best expression of ourself. And we do have to cover lots of difficult issues, but we are also not a substitute for therapy. So if anything, we encourage, and we'll talk more about that, to go out into your community to then find that kind of support if this is work that you're facing that does need the help of a licensed professional.
Yes. Please seek out resources in your area. We will definitely be providing a resource for you on our website with different links of places that you might be able to find further help. If this is coming up for you right now, or if all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is a sign that I need to do this now and I need to go talk to someone, make this be your sign, whatever it is that you need to do. And we tried our best to find resources that we felt are accessible. And if you know of any, please send them our way so that we can do our research and recommend those as well. What we hope to do is really encourage you to be your own advocate by providing you the resources to do so. And one of the things that my therapist used to always tell me is that things get worse before they get better. And I really want to reiterate that, because as we go into this, it's like, okay, I should be better now, or why am I still feeling this way? Or it's been years, or, for some people it's years, for some people it's a lifetime, for some people it goes away. And so we just have to remember that for everybody, it's a different journey, and just be gentle with ourselves and know that things will heal in due time.
They will. With that, I think we will close.
So in the words of Ernest Holmes, I am one with a complete understanding of truth. I do open my eyes and I do see. This word operates even through me and manifests through my eyes now. Open my eyes that I may see. Well, that was something. Thank you so much for being here today and for listening to the Love and Evolve podcast. Un beso. Mwah.
Mwah. We thank you for sharing your time with us and for listening to the Love and Evolve podcast, where we share tools, resources, and education on topics that cover holistic wellness, encompassing mind, body, and spirit.
Find details on how to stay connected with us in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Les damos un fuerte y enorme abrazo. Mwah.
Mwah.